The 15-Point Plan is part of the Win, Make, Give podcast network.
Welcome back to another episode of the 15-Point Plan podcast. My name is Ryan Greigg, and I'm joined, as always, with my co-host, Jacqueline Smith.
Hello, everyone. We are so excited always to have you listen in and to share more elements of the 15-Point Plan with you. Our goal, as always, is to help you become happier, healthier, and have more energy, and of course, less stress. Today, we are going to talk about another one of the 15 points in the 15-Point Plan, and we are going to talk about learning, Ryan. I recently read a quote that I thought was so inspiring. It's from Michael Jordan, and it said, "My greatest skill was being teachable. I was like a sponge. Even if I thought my coaches were wrong, I tried to listen and learn something." And I thought, wow, this is like Michael Jordan, arguably, I know because I have boys and they do argue about this, the greatest basketball player of all time. And he says that his greatest skill was being teachable. And I thought that was so fascinating because it takes a level of humility, I think, to remain teachable, even when you're that good, to always be looking for more to learn and to be in that posture of learning and being teachable.
I think that's such a good point, Jacqueline. And I think about that a lot. Michael Jordan, like you said, arguably one of the greatest athletes of all time, whether it's in a sport, whether it's in business, whether it's in many different buckets of our life. Are we coachable? Are we open to being taught? Even when we're this someone like Michael Jordan or someone at the highest level, we can always learn more. We can always get a little bit better and continue to be coachable and continue to learn. And that's why I love this subject, because we know, Jacqueline, the more we learn, the more we earn. We stop learning, we stop earning. This is all tied together. So let's talk about some of the ways that we can learn, right? There's a lot of different ways that we can learn. I mean, the obvious, we could pick up a book. We could pick up a book and read that book. We could listen to that book on Audible. We can listen to podcasts like this podcast. Hopefully you learn something each time you tune into the 15-Point Plan podcast. So we can listen to podcasts, which there's no shortage of on the 15-Point Plan and the Win, Make, Give network, as well as some of your other favorite podcasts out there. But then, Jacqueline, there's learning from people like our mentors and like our coaches. And that was something that I wanted to dive into a little bit more today on what that looks like, because we've talked about that in the past, about having a mentor, about having a coach. But my question that came up to me today in regards to learning was, do we have that person in all the buckets of our life? You know, it's going to be easy for me as a business person to find a business coach. Oh, but what about in the other buckets of my life, like my relationships, like my physical fitness, like my mental fitness? Do I have a mental fitness coach? Do I have a relationship coach? And over the last couple of years, I've started to get those people in my life. And it really has made a difference in the wholeness of my life, if that makes sense. In the wholeness of my life, for example, my best friend, who I've mentioned on the podcast in the past, he's happily married. He's got 2 beautiful kids. They've been together for a long time. I look at him as a pillar of somebody that I would love to be like in the relationship bucket. So I've labeled him my relationship coach. When I have a question about relationships, specifically with his spouse or a partner of mine, I ask him and I call him and I say, "Nick, hey, can I talk to my relationship coach for a second?" I'm very clear. I just say, "Hey, can I just have a moment with my relationship coach?" And it's allowed me to lean on him and allowed him to just give me some of the things that has worked for him. So having those mentors and those coaches in all the buckets of our life and not just the one. And that stood out to me in this learning episode of finding those people in all those buckets of our life. What do you think about that, Jacqueline?
Yeah, I think that's so important. And I remember Ben saying that, there's rarely you're going to find someone that has it all together and has it all figured out. And so if you're looking to someone, maybe who has great financial success and success in business, and yet they, maybe haven't been successful in marriage or, in raising kids or whatever, you need to find those people. And it may not be in all one person, right? So it can be books. It can be all the things that you mentioned, podcasts, whatnot. But I think it's really important. Like we talked about on a previous episode, I hired someone just to help me with mindfulness.
Right.
So yeah, just looking at what am I working on? And here's the thing, I find that most high performers, they are always working on something. And
I agree. Yeah. Keep going. Keep going.
well, it's just that, and if you're not, then you've probably, if you're really honest with yourself, come to a place where maybe you're a little stagnant. And it's not that we're trying to constantly fix something, but I think there's something to learning and growing that, like they say, if you're not growing, you're dying, right? And
Mhm.
I think that there's something life-giving about learning, and I really think that's why Ben had this as one of the 15 points, because it gives you something to focus on, to improve upon, and just to really keep your brain active. And I think there's something to that brings an element of joy, um, and pursuit in our lives.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. It reminds me of, well, when I was trying to learn a little bit more about one of my favorite business people and just humans, I guess, Rob Deerdeck, who I think we've talked about in the past. Rob Deerdeck did a podcast, and the title was one of those catchy, the one thing you can do to change your life, right? And everybody's wondering, what's the one thing that we could do? And well, according to Rob, the one thing that he shared that you could do to absolutely impact your life was to spend a little bit of time every day learning in all the buckets of life. He
Mm,
said a lot of people go wrong because they go really, really hard on one area. But when they do that, they leave out the others, right? For example, we want to make this change in our health and we do all these things around our health and our wellness and we do all these things around our diet. But in doing so, I just went to the gym 2 or 3 hours more and I wasn't home with my partner or I wasn't home with my relationships and I didn't spend so can we do this in a way that we're spending the time learning and becoming better at one thing that not is not taking from another? Is kind of
mm,
what I heard him saying. And that was if we can learn a little bit every day in mind, body, soul, business, relationship, in all of those buckets, it's that 1% rule, right? We're getting 1% better in all those buckets every
mm.
single day. And we just continue to grow and to grow in all those buckets. And we're going to stay more well rounded in those buckets. So I really like the way he presented that and the reminder to do a little bit every day in all buckets.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I was really into mindset and personal development for years and years and years. And I remember Ben saying at one point, I said, I want to become a student of wealth. I wanted to learn how, I mean, I was so fascinated when you hear these people that are investing at really high levels and they just have such a great understanding of wealth, saving on taxes, all these things. And he was like, well, when was the last time you read a book on money? And I hadn't. And so
Mm-hmm.
I was like, wow, I need to really think about what are the things that I really want to work on in my life that will be impactful to my life. And am I focusing on those, or am I just focusing on the things that I kind of tend towards, that I enjoy? I mean, that's great. I enjoy reading about mindset, about all that. But if I force myself, if I'm working on my health, for example, I force myself to read books about fitness and nutrition and health, I mean, I'll have more of an opportunity to be successful in that and to level up. Same thing with finances. So I really like that approach. And I love thinking about not just what am I listening to because it feels good and it does fill my book bucket, but what am I really wanting to improve? And am I taking in content and surrounding myself with people that will help me in that area?
Well, that's right. And that's where we take things to the next level. Like you mentioned, was we can read a book, we can read 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes a day. We can listen to that podcast. But if we really want that impact, we got to just submerge ourselves in that culture, in that place, in that area of those high performers. And you mentioned going to some events and what
Mm.
that looks like for learning and how that will just really fast track this. Share with me and our audience what the recent event that you went on and then how you learned so much in that short period of time.
Yeah. So Spring Benson, she's actually a new partner in our organization. She has a real estate team in Utah. And last year they sold, I think, just over 750 homes. So it's a really large team. And she hosted this event called Spring Break. And yeah, I went to learn from her, wow, this woman is closing 750 transactions and has just a phenomenal team culture. And yeah, I wanted to go learn. And she had this saying that she repeated throughout the conference. And she said, live events change lives.
Mm,
And I think we, especially through, the COVID whole thing, we got really over indexed on Zoom. We pulled back, from live events, obviously, and I know that people are really craving that connection. And so many times I've been to events, and it actually the most impactful thing from the event, when I think back, wasn't even necessarily the actual event, but it was some of the connections and the contacts that I made outside of the curated content or the speakers that really changed my life. And so I thought that was so powerful. Live events change lives because
mm,
I think when we're learning, you can take in information, and this was one of the things that was shared that I wrote down. There's knowledge and then there's insight. And you could read my notes, Ryan, from that event, but you wouldn't have had the experience that I had from being there and from the conversation that took place around the knowledge that was shared, that gives that insight and that shift in perspective that then affects how I approach my day or how I approach problems and different things. So I thought that was so powerful, knowledge versus insight. And I think where the real learning really comes in is when we have that insight, that shift in perspective, that changes how we think and how we
mm.
approach things. And that can't always come from just reading something. It comes from really integrating what you read, right?
That I think the words that you just used is kind of the definition to learning and excelling. It's changing how we think.
Hmm.
It's taking that information and literally changing how we think. And I think you nailed it with that. Live events change lives. I mean, I can read Tony Robbins, but when I go to that Tony Robbins event for 4 days, it's completely different. I spent 2 months living in Spain as an exchange student. I studied Spanish for 3 years, right? But living in Spain for 2 months, the
Hmm.
difference of being submerged in that culture and learning in that culture. I've seen David Goggins speak. I've seen Tom Bilyeu speak. The first time I ever saw Brendan Burchard, or heard about him for that matter, was at a live
Hmm.
event, and I was hooked on Brendan's energy. From that moment I saw him on stage, he changed how I thought. He changed how I showed up. And, I could read a million Brendan Burchard books, watch Brendan Burchard videos, watch them online, but being in that crowd, feeling that energy, and then guess what? Now I've shared that energy with a few hundred people around me. Our brain is on the same wavelength as that person. So then when I leave that room, like you said, and I take those insights and I share that with the people that are around, now I've just 10x that
Yeah.
because I've absorbed Brendan's energy literally by being in that room, as well as hundreds of people's energy. And now we can share that. And that's going to change how we think, which is so powerful. Uh, yeah, live events change lives. That's super cool. I really, I took a lot away from that, and changing how we think is the definition of really excelling at learning, I think.
Yeah. I'm excited because I'm going to Brendan Burchard's live event in LA next month. So it'll be my first one, and I'm really, really excited about it. And it's got me really thinking about leadership and the environments that we are in. And I think it's why, we can share all of our tactics, all of our business strategy tactics. We can share our presentation, our marketing. But the thing I think that really sets, just using our team and our organization as an example, that sets us apart is the people and the insight that we get from the collaboration in the community and the learning that takes place. And that can't be duplicated. And so when you think about leadership and learning, if you can help the people around you learn and you can teach, I mean, it's such a great way to master something is to teach it, they say. And when you want to level up the people around you, learn together and teach together and grow together. It's just so powerful. And so I hope that you all are really enjoying learning along this journey with us on how these small daily habits can really impact us over the long term. And it's not about being perfect, but it's about getting a little bit better and focusing on sharpening our saws, adding tools to the toolbox. And over time, we hope that if you stick with us on this journey, that you'll look back and be healthier and be happier, be less stressed. And we really are thankful for you being on this journey with us and for sharing the podcast and for just sharing your experience with us in our Facebook group and on Instagram. So we are so happy that you're here, and we hope that you'll tune in next time. Ryan, do you have anything else to add?
Jacqueline, that was an incredibly value-packed episode on learning and on shifting my perspective and changing how I think. Thank you. I learned something today, so I appreciate what you shared, and I hope our listeners did as well. As always, hit that like button, that share button. Join us at winmakegive.com for all other podcast episodes. Join our Facebook group and find us on Instagram, Jacqueline Ray Smith, and of course, Bentley's Old Man. Until next time, we'll see you then.
Bye, everyone.